All right, time to dive into the NL West divisions, the final division to discuss here in terms of what you might be able to expect and what these teams' situations are heading into this winter. The NL West featured some new competition for the Dodgers, who of course went on to win the World Series. It featured some new competition for the Dodgers, but also some clubs with relatively high expectations that fell well short of them as well. Arizona Diamondbacks are first up, and they got an F grade from me for their 2020 performance. They were right up there with the Angels in terms of the biggest disappointments of 2020. The team added Madison Bumgarner, Cole Calhoun, and Starling Marte in the offseason, and they had three returning regulars who posted an OPS above 825 in 2019. So they were in a good position. It seemed like they were going for it. But all three of those players, Eduardo Escobar, Ketel Marte, Christian Walker, they all took a significant step back at the plate this past season. Bumgarner's first season with Arizona was a complete disaster. Starling Marte found himself traded to the Marlins at the trade deadline. And Robbie Ray and Archie Bradley were also dealt, as the D-backs finished a very forgettable season with the second worst record in the National League. Now, the big lesson learned is 2020 was disappointing, but an complete overhaul, is not necessary. There's reason to agree with the front office in their assessment that the building blocks for a successful team still exist. Calhoun's coming off a strong season. Marte, Walker, Escobar, they should all bounce back to some degree next season. There's also a solid top three in the rotation with Zach Gallen and Caleb Smith and Bumgarner, who they have to hope is going to bounce back. There were some positive signs from him near the end of the year. This isn't a team devoid of any high-end talent, but they're not in a great situation either. The key questions for them this offseason: are they going to be willing to spend again? Last offseason, they were coming off a good year, and they decided to try to add some pieces in Bumgarner and Marte, but that didn't work out. So will the team try again and add a relatively high-profile free agent, or will they say, yeah, that didn't work, let's just see if we can get some guys to get back on track instead? They also have to address the back end of their bullpen because Archie Bradley and Andrew Chafin are both gone. They were both traded. So they've got some free agents. They could use somebody proven for the back end of their bullpen. There's a lot of options, so I'm not going to start listing them. There's some ideas that I had in the article. It's on the website right now. That will be going on the website later this week, I should say. Some offseason needs for the Diamondbacks. They could use some productive bats. They're not going to sign George Springer or DJ LeMahieu most likely, but maybe Jackie Bradley, Tommy La Stella, Colton Wong, something to add some stability. It's really hard to know what they're thinking right now and how much money they might be willing to spend. They could also use some rotation depth as well. Not really super optimistic about the Diamondbacks heading into this offseason, but they're not also in a horrible position either. The Colorado Rockies, I gave a D+ for their 2020 performance. They were one of the biggest early season surprises this past year. They jumped out to a 12-5 start, and all of a sudden there was a lot of hype around the Colorado Rockies, a lot of buzz, articles being written about them, and then they completely collapsed. Their record the rest of the way, 14-39. German Marquez, Kyle Freeland, Antonio Senzatella, it's actually a pretty strong trio atop their rotation, something they haven't had a lot of. But they've still finished 29th in baseball in team ERA, and they couldn't make up for it with an offense that was 25th in OBP, 22nd in home runs. Trevor Story and Charlie Blackmon were pretty good, but they didn't get much support. Nolan Arenado had a down year as he battled a shoulder injury. And so the Rockies are in a bit of a strange spot right now. They've got the starting pitching core of a competitive team. They've got the star hitters. Yet they're coming off back-to-back fourth-place finishes in the division. Story and Arenado could potentially leave at the end of 2021. The budget is tight. Younger players aren't taking the steps forward that the club hoped. So something needs to change, but we can't expect the Rockies to sign a big free agent. The team's going to have to be smart on upgrades to its bullpen, and young hitters are simply going to have to do better. And that core is going to have to do well for things to change in 2021. It's a weird spot for the Rockies right now. I know I've said that for a few teams, but it's a really weird spot the Rockies are in right now. Couple questions. Well, will Nolan Arenado get traded this winter? That's a big one. We've talked about him being connected to the Dodgers, but he's expressed his displeasure with their front office last spring, and he can opt. But the tricky thing is with him, he can opt out of his contract at the end of next season. So they could try to trade Arenado. They get some really salary relief to do other things, but they might try to trade him because they're afraid of him walking away next offseason without getting something in return. But a trade this offseason is not going to be easy because potential suitors for Arenado are going to be only guaranteed 1 year before he could opt out. So they want a value for him, but the teams that might be interested are going to say, well, how do we know we're going to have him more than a year? They don't. So it's a tricky situation. He's been connected to the Dodgers. He's been connected to the Cardinals. We'll see if he actually gets moved. How can the bullpen be repaired? That's another question for the Rockies. Their reliever ERA was 6.77 in 2020, so they could use a experienced free agent addition. I know I've said this with so many teams, but there are a lot of experienced veteran relievers out there. So we'll see if they strike with adding a one or two of them. So like I said, experienced bullpen help. They could also use another proven hitter. I don't think they're going to spend big, but maybe Mitch Moreland, Carlos Santana. Somebody could come in and help play at first base. We'll have to see. The Dodgers are the next team up, and this is an easy one I don't have to get into very much because they got an A+. They were indisputably the best team in baseball in 2020. Top 2 in runs, home runs, OPS, ERA, opponent's batting average. I mean, they were outstanding. And they relied on their combination of star power and depth, and they broke their 32-year championship drought. Mookie Betts finished second in NL MVP voting. Corey Seager was great. He was fully healthy. Clayton Kershaw dominated. You know the Dodgers. We've talked about the Dodgers. There's no reason to believe they can't do it again next year. They're the betting favorites to repeat in 2021, to win the World Series in 2021. Justin Turner is their only high-profile free agent, and they've got the resources to make big additions via trade or free agency this offseason if they feel like it. So their key questions: will Justin Turner return? He's been considered the heart and soul of the Dodgers, but he's getting up there in age. He's been very productive when healthy, but he has an injury history. He's getting up there in age. Defense isn't what it used to be, and the Dodgers could turn elsewhere, or they could bring him back on like a 2-year contract. There's also questions about the ninth inning. They could add a high-profile reliever. Kenley Jansen's got 1 year left on his contract, and he's not the dominant closer he used to be, so they could go out there and add a Liam Hendricks or something. We'll have to see. They could go out there and add a Trevor May, a Kirby Yates. They've got the resources to add one of those high-profile, experienced late-inning arms if they feel like it. And they could also use an answer at third base. So, whether it be re-signing Turner or trading for Chris Bryant or signing DJ LeMahieu and shifting guys around, or trading for Francisco Lindor and moving Corey Seager to third. There's a lot of options. The Dodgers have a lot of resources, so who knows what they could end up doing. The San Diego Padres are the next team up here to discuss in the NL West, and I give the Padres an A grade for 2020. No team in the league took as big of a step forward as the Padres. Fernando Tatis, Manny Machado, one of the best left sides of the infield in baseball. A strong rotation that got better when they added Mike Clevenger. Rookie Jake Cronenworth, veteran Will Myers, all these guys chipping in. The Padres ended the second longest playoff drought in the National League. They defeated the Cardinals in the first round of the playoffs, but with injuries playing a big role, injuries to starters, they didn't put up much of a fight against the Dodgers in the NLDS. The big lesson for them, look, they flipped the script. They were in the midst of rebuilding efforts and signings. They were making moves that they weren't getting anywhere. And all of a sudden, they shifted from being the laughingstock of the National League to one of the most exciting teams in baseball almost instantaneously this year. Tatis Jr., one of the faces of the game for years to come. The front office saw a team that was really good at the midway point of the season and said, let's make it better. And they were the most active team prior to the trade deadline. They took a huge step forward organizationally in 2020, and they're going to be one of the teams, the best teams in baseball, most exciting teams in baseball for several years to come. I really believe that. Their key questions this offseason, well, could they add another starter? Of course, we talked about it here on the show. We found out the other day that they've signed Mike Clevenger to a 2-year extension, but that he underwent Tommy John surgery and thus will miss the entire 2021 season. So if they're trying to match up well with the Dodgers, trying to stir things up, they've got a good rotation, but they could make a big move and sign Masahiro Tanaka, Jake Odorizzi, or maybe they trade for Lance Lynn or something. I mean, there's a whole bunch of possibilities. for the Padres if they want to make their rotation significantly better for 2021. And that's one of my other questions for them. Is AJ Preller going to run it back with the offense, or is he going to make significant changes? This is a GM who's known to not be one to sit still when it comes to big moves. But that offense was incredible. There's a real case to be made that they don't have to make many changes to the offense except maybe add a couple bench pieces, because all their starters at the position, all their position player starters are returning next year. So we'll see if Preller pushes the envelope, tries to make a move, make a splash with the offense, or if he sits still when it comes to the offense, because there's a case to be made, like I said, that that's the right thing to do. They're going to need some relief pitching because Kirby Yates and Trevor Rosenthal are both hitting the open market. So they could go after a veteran, just like some of these other names I mentioned, Trevor May, Alex Colomé. There's a lot of options out there, and like I said, a bench piece. But offensive overhaul, not necessary, though we could see a big move. We'll just have to see. All right, the San Francisco Giants are the final team to discuss in the NL West, and I gave them a B grade for their 2020 performance because they exceeded expectations. They weren't an outstanding team, but they didn't make the playoffs, but they exceeded expectations for them. It's like the sort of like, again, factoring in the expectations, the circumstances for these clubs in the grades that I handed out. And so I gave the Giants a B because they finished just under 500, the first team out of the NL playoff field. They had short-term deals with a couple of pitchers like Kevin Gausman and Drew Smyly and Trevor Cahill, and they paid off. The offense was surprisingly good. Finished top 5 in the NL in runs and OPS. Mike Yastrzemski, Alex Dickerson, the outfielders, they both broke out. And we learned that perhaps this core has one more run left in them. Brandon Belt, Brandon Crawford, Buster Posey, they've only got 1 year left on their contracts. Posey opted out of this past season after he and his wife were adopting twins that had been born prematurely. Belt had a career year at age 32. At the plate, Crawford had a bounce-back season. Journeyman infielder Donovan Solano just won a Silver Slugger. They've got the talent to compete in 2021. That offense is surprisingly much better than I think everybody expected it to be. They've re-signed Kevin Gausman, who accepted their 1 year, $18.9 million qualifying offer. Some of the questions for them, they promoted their top catching prospect, their top prospect overall, Joey Bart, and he had some growing pains. Buster Posey's going to be back in 2021, so how does that all play out? They also need some more help for the rotation. They re-signed Gausman, but they're going to need some other guys too, because that was a weakness for them. They've got some free agents. Don't think it's going to be high caliber options, but I think they're going to bring in somebody to help anchor the rotation alongside Gausman, or at least they should. So again, their offseason needs more starting pitching. They're not going to sign Trevor Bauer most likely, but maybe a Corey Kluber, a James Paxton, a Mike Minor, or a Rich Hill, something like that to help add some stability to the rotation. They could also use some veterans, a veteran addition for the bullpen, maybe somebody cheap in terms of the contract cost. Mark Melancon, Sean Doolittle are a couple ideas. They've got an interesting bullpen, but a young bullpen. So some additions there would be helpful. But again, the Giants, all of a sudden, hey, maybe they've got another run left in them. That's my big observation from 2020. Another run left in them with this core, the Posey, Crawford, Belt core. Maybe there's one more chance for them to make a run at it coming up next season.